All right, thanks for joining me today, Tsahi. There has been a flurry of announcements from Cloudflare around WebRTC recently. Here's a post from you recently on LinkedIn about this, where you said that from being a non-player with a nice turn implementation and an SFU nobody knew how to chew, Cloudflare is becoming a very interesting vendor with a differentiated offering. So tell us a little bit about these announcements and what makes the combination of these announcements different.
Well, luckily I came with the right color of a shirt that fits the Cloudflare logo.
Cloudflare color, that's right. Cloudflare endorsed shirt, good.
Yep. And there's also an article on my website if you want to go and check on Blog Geek Me. Essentially, if you think about it, Cloudflare is the fourth IaaS vendor. We've got what? Amazon, then there's Microsoft with Azure, and then there's Google with GCP. And after these three, there is Cloudflare. And when you think about what each one of them does around WebRTC, not much, or not the right things for an IaaS vendor. So Amazon has the Chime SDK and the IVS, ISV, something like that does streaming and has a bit of WebRTC in it. And they also have their cloud gaming or cloud gaming platform. I just don't good at that, at the names of these parts. Then if you look at Azure or Microsoft, they have Microsoft Teams and the ACS, Azure Communication Services, and they have the Xbox thingy. They have Luna, Amazon Luna for cloud gaming, and there is Xbox Cloud for Microsoft. All of these things use WebRTC. So these two have some kind of an SDK or an API for developers as well, which makes sense for an IaaS vendor. And there, Cloudflare now becomes a kind of a competitor in that space to some extent. Google has libWebRTC. They've got all of the browsers using their implementation of WebRTC, Google Meet, and that's about it. No APIs for developers besides the fact that, well, there's WebRTC in the browser, which is kind of a shame, I think. And then comes in Cloudflare, the fourth largest vendor and the one that has the most amount of data centers across the globe out of all of them. So if you go and count regions, they each have 20, 30, 40 regions. Cloudflare comes and says, we've got 300 plus cities are across the globe. So they're fine in terms of size. They started with Turn, which is not much, but nice. Then they added the SFU. The SFU was kind of interesting, but not. Okay, because, okay, I've got an SFU, it's on the cloud. How do I communicate with it? What's the signaling protocol that I'm going to use with that SFU? Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, you never actually think about what's the signaling protocol when you use a CPaaS platform or video API platform, because, well, I download this, I take the SDK from that vendor, I take the Chime SDK or the ACS SDK, I call the APIs inside that SDK, and that communicates with the cloud service on some mundane protocol, which I don't give a damn. I don't care. It just works. Magic. But how do you do that with Cloudflare if there is no exact signaling protocol? And their official answer is something like, well, you use WebRTC for that and send SDP messages. Well, great, but how? It's not as easy as using an API. So that becomes a problem. And it becomes even bigger when you think about things like, well, how do I now use simulcast and how do I optimize simulcast and how do I do things that require me to somehow control or tell this a few things about my application, because I can't. There is no official way of doing that. And I think that somewhere in 2025, they caught up and understood that nobody is going to use their SFU in any way if they continue with that route. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that we've seen them do is go and acquire Diet. Mm-hmm. Diet is an Indian vendor. Yep. Indian vendor which did the video API platform. That's it. And what they essentially would do is say, well, we're going to take Diet or take the employees. They have an SDK. We'll use that SDK. All of the backend, we don't care. Over time, we'll throw that and replace it with Cloudflare instead of whatever they have there with our SFU. They might have even gone as far as say, well, we don't even care about the client SDK of Dite or the customers of Dite. We just care about them taking the skill set and know-how and building our SDK. And that's what you kind of feel and see when you go to cloudflare.com and actually see that inside their real-time part of the platform, which says, that's the WebRTC part, you've got real-time kit. You don't have Dite SDK. So
Right.
it's kind of, I'm not sure that they even maintain the same APIs. I don't
Mhm.
believe that they would. But they have a team that knows how to do SDKs, and now they are doing SDKs as part of their solution. So that was the first interesting step, which was like putting out the white flag of, well, we surrender, we need an SDK to build whatever it
We'll
is.
give you a signaling protocol. We'll give you an SDK.
Now we'll give you an API to use instead of you trying to figure out how to use our SFU, because, well, if you don't handhold you won't be able to do that anyway. So we can't scale this to a lot of customers. So that was a smart move, or a move that just made sense. It was an obvious one. I think that it was either just shutting down the whole thing of the SFU and saying, well, we tried, didn't work, let's move on. So that was the first investment this year. And then second, we had, I don't know which one was first, the mock or the other one, but then they put out a post saying, well, we've deployed mock media over quick, which isn't WebRTC. It's a kind of a protocol that is competing next to it. I don't know, depends how you want to look at that. But media over quick means that you're going to send the media in real time over the quick protocol, which is HTTP3 in a way, or web transport, other new acronyms that we have today in web browsers. It's an up-and-coming protocol. It doesn't work across all browsers, not available everywhere, still not standardized. Go back in time 8 years or 10 years, and well, that's WebRTC. So we're at the beginning of that route. And there have done the explanation of we're at the beginning of the route of using mock. The main thing about mock as a protocol is that it doesn't assume that you need an SFU, or it doesn't assume that you need something that isn't standardized. So it works with a publisher, subscriber, so there is the sender part, the receiver part, and something in the middle called the relay. And the relay is just a server that supports quick in a way. And guess what? All web servers today that are modern would support quick because HTTP3 is quick. So that's kind of an advantage of how we can build this for CDNs. So it's not for WebRTC, it's for live streaming most of the time. I want to send a single stream to hundreds, thousands, or millions of people at the same time. I don't want to build the whole infrastructure on my own. I can go to someone like Cloudflare and use their CDN that now supports quick and mock and do it through them. That's the whole intent in there.
And that's a pretty forward-looking move on their part, right? Because we're, as you said, it's not completely standardized yet as of October 2025 when we're recording this, but we expect it will be in the first half of 2026 is the latest that I've heard, that it will be standardized then and supported in all the browsers and web transport as well. So yeah, we'll see, obviously, but
and then we actually go and look. If I remember correctly, I think that Akamai already has something similar to that. And you see other vendors talking about that. And most of these vendors would be in the streaming and CDN space.
Right.
So it's not as if they're doing something before everyone else. There's also, I've talked to someone and he said, well, you know what? It feels like they wrote that in terms of internal needs of politics and not actual forward-looking things or whatever, which it might be the case. With large companies, you always have that. The engineers running ahead and then just putting things out there as a kind of, well, now we do that. You can't say we don't. So I don't know, but it is interesting. It is forward-looking. It is nice to see. It's also something that I'm probably going to try and research more by the end of this year, beginning of the next. If this will happen in 2026, I don't know. How much time it will actually take to mature and have it on something that isn't Chrome. That's always an unknown. What's the incentive of browser vendors here? I don't know either.
Yeah.
Because with WebRTC, there was a clear incentive for Google to do it. Google Meet, we need it for Google Meet. That's it. What's the incentive for Google to do mock? Would that be for YouTube? It's like the only asset that they have that might be relevant for that.
Right.
I'm not sure if they really, it's like, I don't know.
Well, and Apple's big on the streaming game too. So, there's a good incentive perhaps for supporting it as well. But
Apple doesn't care about the browsers, hence they might go proprietary in whatever solution they end up doing.
right.
So I don't see Apple deciding to stream games to an Android device.
Right.
So
But then there's one more thing we should make sure to get to too, that Cloudflare also announced in August.
That's the actual big thing in my mind and the most interesting one. And that's the fact that they decided to start offering voice AI tooling.
Yeah.
So it started a bit. They told in Diet release that they are working with Hugging Face, and you can use 11 Labs, I think it was there, or Deepgram or something like that. But then you actually had the full set of tools for voice AI, an actual framework, different types of frameworks that you can use. So there was an edge one that sits inside the Cloudflare cloud, but close to the users, where you can build the whole pipeline or define the whole pipeline of speech to text, LLM, text to speech, and back to the user, all in WebRTC from your point of view in terms of how you connect it. That was, let's say, the obvious one. The interesting ones are actually the other ones. They decided to put on the edge a kind of a worker AI that allows you to use WebRTC and Opus in your client, but then it acts as a gateway into your AI service that makes that into WebSocket and PCMU. So essentially G711, which is what you need WebSocket and PCMU if you want to connect that at the end of the day into a speech-to-text engine running in the cloud. So they did the whole transformation for you. So that becomes something that you don't need to take care of. And again, deployed across 300 plus regions or cities, whatever you want to call it. So that was the second thing. Then they said, well, you know what? Deepgram, the speech-to-text and text-to-speech models, we're going to run on our edge. You don't need to find your own GPUs and put your own machines. That's on us to do. And that the fact that they started putting these things out means that they want to be an actual player there, a serious player.
Yeah.
That's what I found really interesting, because I don't think that Google, Amazon, or Microsoft are doing any good job there in these cases. They all have solutions for that, but it's not as simple or thoughtful to use that as you would see, for example, from Daily and LiveKit with their Pipekit and LiveKit agents. And here I think it's the first time that someone does something that would be, I wouldn't even, maybe not as flexible, but as easy to use and simple to set up and to play with and configure. So that's kudos for what they're doing there.
I think that's the interesting part, is that they, this is essentially a more competitive with what Pipekit does in terms of an orchestration framework, but with the Cloudflare edge infrastructure porting it, right, which is helpful in voice AI because you can presumably have lower latency, which is super important by being distributed closer to the users, right? But the downside, if I think if you agree with compared to Pipekit, is, like you said, less flexibility, and you're more tied to that vendor's network and distribution. So it's kind of a, there are pros and cons to everything as usual.
And I think my biggest question is, can they eat everything that they're now chewing? Because they're doing both unified communications, they're doing live streaming, and they're doing voice AI. Each one of these is big on its own, and we've never seen up until today a company that can do two even out of these three at the same time and stay there for a long period of time and be successful in two of them together. So you either do live streaming or you do group calling. And you talk about LiveKit and Daily. Well, they were great. They did group calling. Now everything they talk about is just voice AI.
They're focusing on voice AI pipelines now. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So it's not as if they're doubling down on two things at the same time. And now we have Cloudflare almost playing catch up in 3 different domains that each one of them is hard on its own. And you've got a lot of innovation coming into voice AI, a lot of new stuff coming into media over quick, and a lot of work that they still need to do in group calling because they just acquired DITE. So how do you manage all that in the same time? I have no clue.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out for sure. I mean, I think one thing that's interesting to note about all of this is it does really show in all of these players that we've mentioned here, Daily, LiveKit, Cloudflare, that how WebRTC is really first class as the input path for voice AI. The Cloudflare, one of their announcements, talked about how you could use WebSockets for like machine-to-machine transfers of things, but really voice AI is about human-to-machine interactions, and that in all scenarios is 100% WebRTC.
Almost. There's one small scenario that it's not there, and it's the biggest one, which is me calling on my phone to complain to a contact center. There is no WebRTC in there if the contact center is a bot.
Yeah.
And it just dawned on me that we're all working WebRTC with AI, but what we actually need is SIP, which is what OpenAI just added in the GPT real-time thing.
Fair enough. There's often a combination of WebRTC and SIP in those architectures too, depending on the media servers and the LLMs and everything. So yeah, there's a place there for it. And anyways, it's a lot of interesting announcements from Cloudflare for sure on that. Be interesting to see how that all pans out. Any other closing thoughts you want to share today before we wrap?
No, not this time. I think I talked enough.
Well, we had a lot to cover in that conversation for sure, so it's good. So as always, thank you for sharing your insights with us today, Tsahi. For those of you watching, to learn more about Tsahi's work and to read his latest post going into this in more depth, go to bloggeek.me. And to learn more about future episodes of WebRTC Live and our work at WebRTC.ventures, check us out at WebRTC.ventures. Thanks, Tsahi.
Thank you, Arin.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.